oh man, did WandaVision episode 4 change the game for that show and quite possibly for the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. Let's break down to the best of our ability all the insane things that were revealed in WandaVision episode 4. What's up, everybody? It's Josh. Welcome back to the channel. Smash that like button. And a reminder to everybody that a large part of what we're doing as the Den of Nerds is happening over on our live streaming channel. And on that note, we did do a spoiler-filled live stream talking about the episode right after we watched it. So go check that over out on the live streaming channel. We get into a lot of different ideas in that stream. It was pretty cool. Now, let's just get right into this because this might be a long one, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of stuff happened in this episode, and the cold open is where it all begins, where we see Monica Rambua coming back from the blip in the hospital. Now, this was really freaky, and it sets up a couple of different things. Number one, it sets up the weirdness and the just sort of perspective of people that are getting blipped back and what that was like. And from the perspective of Monica, she was just in the waiting room with her mother, Maria, at the hospital after a surgery in which she had thought her mother just beat cancer. And to Monica, it would appear as though no time had passed. She's just back in the hospital, and she has to understand that 5 total years have passed. Now, on a slight side note here, this whole showing of the darkness that is the MCU universe post-Blip is really interesting and something that was not really touched on in Spider-Man Far From Home, but from what I understand, will be heavily focused on in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is one of the big reasons I'm so dang excited for that show! Now, interestingly enough, we also learn about her mom passing, of course, and then we go right into some scenes with S.W.O.R.D. We see an establishing shot of the S.W.O.R.D. headquarters, and we see the acronym spelled out on the screen, displaying Sentient Weapon Observation Response Division. And just on a side note here, I'm not even sure if this is Earth, and if this is on Earth, it's at some very weird location, as I will explain as we get further into the episode. Now, interestingly enough, Monica Rambua is just showing back up at the S.W.O.R.D. facility, and she's trying to use her badge, and it isn't working. Now, here's what's interesting. I don't know exactly the context here, but it feels like to me, as you watch the scenes, that Monica just shows up with the S.W.O.R.D. badge that she had from when she was working at S.W.O.R.D. with her mother as they were building it, which is probably why it just doesn't work. She's no longer in the system. And as she's having a discussion with security about her badge, Tyler Hayward walks up, who is the acting director of S.W.O.R.D. Monica recognizes him. We learn as an audience that they have some kind of a relationship. And then he brings her in, and through very interesting conversations, we sort of discover that they have a history, that Monica's mother, Maria, was the one that established S.W.O.R.D., and then after the blip, Hayward sort of takes over as acting director. He's kind of the only man for the job, and Hayward also explains that it has been a couple of weeks since the blip, and Monica is the first of the S.W.O.R.D. agents that were blipped back to show up at headquarters. Now, another quick side note, and we're going to have to do this a little bit, so please give Elisa some love in the comments. She's got a lot of weird editing to do on this video, so sorry. Monica asked Hayward about the astronaut training program. This, to me, sort of rang of the S.W.O.R.D. base that perhaps the real Nick Fury and Captain Marvel, maybe, are actually at. And interestingly enough, Hayward sort of downplays it, talking about how it's really not that efficient. It's not the same as when she left, and a lot of people got spooked after the blip. He lost a lot of men. And that's interesting because he also grounds her, leaving her only on terrestrial missions, meaning she'll have no contact with the real Nick Fury and the real S.W.O.R.D. base that's out there being built, seemingly that she had something to do with. Otherwise, why would she ask Hayward about it? Perhaps an interesting thread that we will come back to. And one more little interesting tidbit from this conversation is the fact that Monica asks why creation was taken off of the S.W.O.R.D. logo or the sword name. There used to be creation, and I believe she is referring to the fact that they used to create sentient weapons. Hayward just kind of explains that the world is different than the one she was there before. This, again, is setting up this idea that I think we're going to see play out in the MCU in the next couple of years, and that is that after the blip and Thanos and everything, the world is just so afraid that they're breaking a lot of rules. They're going like harder. So, something that was a creation is now becoming weapon, observation and perhaps even manipulation. And perhaps even something like shield will become something like hammer or anvil. This could also possibly tie into the super soldier creation, things that are going on in that sort of a way. If creation was happening in the sword program that was attached or associated with super soldiers, perhaps the government just changed it to take the creation out of there to sort of hide the tracks of super soldier creation. Now, after Hayward tells her that she's grounded, he also sort of follows that up by explaining that they are going to help the FBI out on a missing persons case. This is where she meets Jimmy Woo. She sort of reluctantly accepts this. She wants to go to the astronaut program, but she's like, all right, I'll do this thing. It's whatever. She goes to meet Jimmy Woo outside of Westview. Now, this is where the episode begins to dump a ton of meta information on us, and it's really, really fun, but sort of hard to follow as you go through it just one time. Two very interesting things are explained right away. Number one, the missing persons is in witness protection, okay? And Jimmy Woo was trying to figure out where this missing person that's also in witness protection was going, and it's a he. And Jimmy went and reached out to a lot of the people that knew this person, and they didn't even remember that this person existed. That's first weird point number one. Weird point number two. The local cops tell Woo and Monica that the town of Westview doesn't exist. There's no such thing. Now, the next thing that happens is we see Monica fly the drone into Westview. It gets absorbed, disappears through the barrier. She goes up to the barrier, she touches the barrier, and then she gets sucked in to Westview. It's at this point in the show when Darcy and all the other scientists show up to Westview, and important, I think, Hayward himself shows up to Westview. And it was Hayward who really insisted on the beekeeper going into the town. All of a sudden, when Monica gets sucked into the town, he gets super interested. Now, it's hard to say whether or not he's interested because of his connection to Monica or because he now realizes this is way bigger than he originally thought. And Darcy and Woo sort of become the audience. They sort of become a meta representation of all the Marvel nerds that have been dissecting all of the Marvel WandaVision episodes thus far, and it's a really, really fun sort of meta experiment where essentially Darcy realizes that there's a frequency that is projecting this sitcom version of reality that they think is taking place in Westview. Now, here's what's really interesting about this. When Darcy explains that there's this sort of perennial universe, prehistoric, pre-Big Bang energy that is flowing out, this radiation, and it's intertwined with a frequency that then can be brought into a television, and that's the WandaVision show. When Hayward realizes this, he immediately leaves and goes back to headquarters. And I'm not sure why, but it's also important that during this investigation, while these people are trying to figure everything out about the WandaVision show, on the whiteboard that Woo is writing things down that we, the audience, have been wondering about, like, is Vision alive? He also writes who is doing this, and you can clearly see that the scrolls is a big option. It's seen very clearly on the whiteboard that Woo and the FBI and now Sword think the scroll themselves could be responsible or involved with this, which indicates that there's other machinations and weird things going on the planet that they perhaps think the scrolls are also involved with. Quick time out. We must now talk about a sort of big Marvel rumor out there that's really, to me, not even that big of a rumor, but depending on how into Marvel stuff you are, this might shock you. So maybe spoiler warning here. It's been heavily indicated and reported by insiders that the announced Secret Wars show, which will have Nick Fury in it, is actually going to be a Disney Plus show that begins the Secret Invasion storyline from the comics, and then that will lead right into Captain Marvel 2, which will be like sort of the conclusion to a crazy Secret Invasion storyline that's like the MCU version. And the Secret Invasion show is official as a whistle, as I just said. It was announced on the December 10th Disney investor premiere thing. They were like, yeah, this show's totally happening. And so the characters of Monica Rambua, the characters of, maybe Hayward and other people attached to Sword, and Nick Fury will play a role in Secret Invasion. And so the Skrulls being on that whiteboard and then being a big part of Secret Invasion, and Secret Invasion tying into Captain Marvel 2, and Monica having connections to Carol, this is all on purpose, and it's really interesting. Now, the big ending and sort of, I guess, reveal at the end of the show is that we begin to see, from Darcy's perspective, that there's editing happening and censoring being done of the WandaVision broadcast, the whatever's happening inside Westview. And we get to see the crazy ending of episode 3 with Monica having that sort of moment with Wanda where she talks about Ultron. And what's interesting is they show Darcy and Wu literally being like, whoa, has that ever happened before? Has there ever been a reference to our reality? And they don't think that there has been. And when Wanda hears that, what Darcy and Wu see is another just edit of the show, and we see that kind of like angry Wanda like step up, right? But then we get to see the perspective of what actually happened, and it is freaky as all get out as Wanda confronts her, knows that she would only know about Ultron if she was an outsider, if she wasn't a neighbor, she wasn't a friend, and she was trespassing. She wants her to leave, and then she uses powerful hex magic, Wanda's like full-on abilities, to blast her out of Westview. And then at the end of the show, we see her on the other side explaining to Sword that now Monica realizes it's Wanda that's controlling this. This is going to change everything and get them to bring in totally big guns, other Avengers, maybe Doctor Strange, etc., to really try to handle what is happening here. But also, we see Vision dead in his gray form with the stone ripped from his head. And I think we're beginning to realize that Vision is dead. He says to Wanda, we can leave. We can go wherever we want. And she says back to him, no, we can't. This is our home now. And she says to him that, don't worry, I have everything under control. Now, that is just facts. That's what's said in the show. Now, take my hand and go to Speculation Town and let's sort of talk about what we think is going on. A lot of fan theories around the show are suggesting that Wanda is essentially making a deal with the devil, some kind of a deal with Mephisto or a Mephisto-like character in order to try to bring Vision back to life. I think that is what is going on here, because it seems as though the location of Westview is important. Wanda says that they must be there. There has to be a reason that they are there, and it has to do with, I think, her goals to bring Vision back. Wanda as a character is full of trauma and has lost a lot, and the world is so crazy in the MCU. I could totally see her being like, well, all of this stuff happened, everything's crazy, Vision had to die because of this. Why can't I just get what I want? Why can't I use my incredible power to just do one thing to bring Vision back? And perhaps because the stones are gone and certain restrictions on reality are being currently lifted, there's the possibility that a nefarious force, maybe the Grim Reaper character, maybe the Mephisto character, maybe Nightmare, maybe a combination of all of those characters, made a deal with Wanda to bring Vision back to life, but the cost of which would be to have the children. And that could be really interesting, because that could imply that perhaps Mephisto or the Nightmare character will literally possess Wanda's children. Wouldn't that be ridiculous? And so overall, I thought this was a fantastic episode. I wasn't super crazy about Wu and Darcy. Their acting wasn't necessarily brilliant, but a lot of the other stuff, like I thought Hayward was brilliant. I thought actually Monica is carrying this show. She is incredible. The actress that plays her is incredible. So there's a lot of really awesome stuff going on in the show. I think we have a better idea of some of the mystery. I think hardcore Marvel fans, again, aren't going to necessarily be as pumped, because a lot of this we sort of know, and we're just getting validated in some of the things we've been hearing and talking about. But I think for like the more casual fans or the normies, like, This is probably wild as hell, and y'all are probably like, yo, this was the episode, dude. Like, crazy. Now we kind of know what's going on. Bizarre, bizarre, bizarre. But anyway, that's sort of the breakdown. We'll be doing a lot of videos and talking about this show on streams a lot, about different theories and things that we think will be going down in the show and the future of the MCU. Things are getting crazy out there, Marvel fans, so make sure you subscribe to this channel and go check out that live streaming channel. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I will see you in the next video.